Welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. Joining us for our first ever Rotary District 5130 North Coast Ethics in Business Awards event. That's a mouthful. Since we have a lot of non-Rotarians joining us today, let me break that down a little bit for you. First was Rotary. We are a service and organization, worldwide service and leadership organization. We're people from many diverse backgrounds all around the globe, but we agree on a vision, a shared vision, that together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change around the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. District 5130, that's the Rotary region that we are in. It spans in the south from Petaluma up to the Oregon border, 315 miles of beauty. Inland, we go to Lake and Napa County, so you can tell we're long and narrow. North Coast Ethics in Business. That's a vision I had at the beginning of my Rotary year, that we could focus on the good in our community. Too often we read the articles, we hear the stories about something that isn't right, but we need to take more time and stop and endorse what is right and congratulate them and celebrate it. So that's the genesis of this program. So why Rotary? Why are we doing it? Well, ethical vocation is in our DNA. We began in 1905 as a business networking group, an ethical business group. We have a four-way test of the things we think, say, and do, which include truth and fairness and goodwill and beneficial to all. We have a statement, the object of Rotary. And let me read a sentence from that, if I may. It includes high ethical standards in business and professions, the recognition of the worthiness of all useful occupations, and the dignifying of each Rotarian's occupation as an opportunity to serve society. Let me unpack that just a little bit. In Rotary, we value everyone. So whether you deliver newspapers or you deliver babies for a vocation, you're important. Whether you're working from home on a laptop in your sweats or the corner suite, a penthouse high-rise building, what you have to offer everyone is the same. We endorse the dignity and the worthiness of everyone's occupation. And it's all of us together that can affect society. I want to give you a little bit of a preview of what's to come. First, I want to thank the over 70 businesses and congratulate you, businesses and nonprofits that were nominated by someone in your community. That alone, being nominated, tells us you're doing something right and you ought to be commended. But we are going to see today videos from 12 finalists. And I think you're going to really enjoy these videos, good snippets. And these are our finalists in the 4 categories. We also have 3 high school scholarships to give out. I'm amazed at the stories these students share, and you're going to love it. And then, of course, we have our keynote speaker, Ken Schatz. He's a Stanford University professor. William will introduce him in a little bit, but we're excited to hear what he has for us today. Before I pass on the program, I would like to first thank the team that put this together. We have a committee of 6 that worked long and hard for many months. So William Rousseau was our chair. Thank you, William. Robert Vanderveld, Sylvia Bertram, Cindy Denbo, Tom Boylan, and Jim O'Grady all worked very hard, long and hard on this, and I thank you for this. We also have some corporate sponsors. Without sponsors, it's very hard to put on events like this. So I want to recognize and thank Summit State Bank, law offices of Spalding, Cullen, and Tansel, Boylan Point Agency, and Jennifer Strong with Strong Financial Networks. Thank you very much for contributing to this event. And we also have 3 media sponsors that helped us get the word out. The North Bay Business Journal, 93.9 The Vine, 96.9 and 1440 AM KVON. So our media sponsors, thank you very much for the help there. And with that, I am going to turn the program over to Robert to start off with our first finalist.
Thank you very much, Doug. I first want to thank our awards committee for their very hard work in selecting the finalists and the winners of these awards. Our committee members were Sylvia Bertram, Bill Bolster, Bonnie Cardoza, Mary Crumley, Cindy Dembo, Melissa Galliani, Rusty Goodlive, Mara Khan, John Kempke, Marie Lamos, Jim O'Grady, Paul O'Rear, Frank Ramos, Dan Rasmus, Laura Tu, and Donna Wright. They are outstanding individuals, and it was a pleasure to work with each of them. They are Rotarians and non-Rotarians, or as we like to call them, future Rotarians. Thank you very much for your work, and let's give them a round of applause. Our committee reviewed over 70 nominations from across the district from Marin to the Oregon border. Nominations in 4 different categories: small businesses of up to 15 employees, medium businesses of 16 to 50 employees, large businesses of 51 or more employees, and a separate category for nominations. Nominees were interviewed by members of the committee about their business ethics, their core values, and how ethics applied to their organizations. The committee's narrowed down the nominees to the bit, and ultimately the winners of the award in each category. This committee very carefully deliberated about the nominees and made very difficult decisions from among some really outstanding organizations that serve our community. We'll start today with the finalists in the small business category, who are Fahrenheit Heating and Cooling, Lunchette, and Sea Ranch Supply. Let's hear from those organizations.
My name is Stacy Atchison, and my husband Chris and I took over Sea Ranch Supply in 2009. We are a hardware store, lumber yard, garden supply store here out on the coast. We start off with what the missions and values are of our organization. Mine would say people first, then the formation of a community. Everyone who comes to Sea Ranch Supply is treated with respect. The energy and service here is full of enthusiasm, humor, and care. We have created that atmosphere, and it is knowledgeable and helpful and comfortable, and everyone has a good experience. You asked what the ethics in business means to me. Would be respect. First would be all of our employees. I would want them to feel respected and appreciated after every single day of work. It's for me feeling respected and appreciated. It's being consistent in our roles and goals of putting people first. It's being profitable and able to reinvest into our business. It's appreciating each customer and each employee who comes in. It's being able to donate. We donate to their senior centers, little leagues, soccer, rodeo associations, advertising with our local radios and our newspapers. But being ethical in business is the big picture for us. And I believe that people and community are first. You talk about the importance of business and its employees. I believe it's setting a standard in business for yourself and employees. That is your first and best investment. When your employees can be safe, trusted, helpful, enthusiastic listeners and communicators, it raises the bar for kindness and respect for one another. I can honestly tell you that everyone truly cares for one another here. They care about our customers and each other. If you're ever up here on the coast, please come in. I can guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Hi, my name is Naomi Crawford, and I own Lunchette in Petaluma. We started in 2017 after owning Pizza Politana for about 12 years. And we started Lunchette to be a grab-and-go salad, grain bowl, pizza restaurant in the heart of Petaluma, where we could bring really healthy, nutritious food to people in a timely manner. And when we started, we decided that we would only work with regenerative farms and make sure that we are educating ourselves and the community on why we choose to work with regenerative farms. And all of our sort of values stemmed from that. Once you start supporting regenerative farms who are paying living wages to people, you start to pay attention to all of the ethics involved in agriculture, in business, in hiring people, equity, equality, diversity. So one thing begets the next, and we found ourselves in a place where we really wanted to be community building and making the community that we're in, which is Petaluma and Sonoma County, better for all community members, not just for some. And so we've really put our ethics first, our values first. We call ourselves a mission-driven restaurant. When we hire our staff, this is what we tell people. We believe that in every aspect of our business, we must first ask, is it good for everyone involved, and is life at the center of each decision we make? We place equity, equality, healthy soil and relationships, justice, and connection to nature and each other equal to the need for profitability. To be an ethical business, it brings people in. The community wants to support that. They feel good spending their money there. And, for a consumer, spending money is how we vote. It's how we decide what we choose to respect and support.
So my name is Armando Godino. I'm the business owner of Fahrenheit Heating and Air Conditioning, and we provide the service of repairing systems that are no longer functioning or just don't make sense running anymore because of the cost of old equipment, when you can get something that's much more efficient nowadays. So our mission, I guess, is to let people know that there's still local companies you can trust that will show up when they say they will, and can go through different options in a language that you will understand. So what does ethics in business mean? So I think it pretty much means, what's morally right to do. And legal and ethical are not the same thing. And if you can separate the two and go about without thinking of how much money you can make in the process, I think that's what ethic in business means. Ethic in business is everything. Your reputation depends on it and is based pretty much on it. Finding the employees that have the talent and have high integrity and honesty, they're hard to come by. And when you're smaller, the quality control is much higher. It's not as difficult as a larger company, and you can monitor everything at a higher level. My parents were all these things, and they kind of passed it on to their kids, and hopefully I can pass it on to my kids as well.
Wow, what a great set of small businesses. We'll learn the identity of the winner in just a moment, but first I want to introduce Jim O'Grady, who chaired the scholarship committee, to tell us about the amazing future business leaders that we're recognizing today. Jim?
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Rotary District 5130's North Coast Ethics and Business Awards is in its first year and is dedicated to maintaining high standards of ethical conduct in business and nonprofit organizations, especially through the contact with the generation preparing to take their positions in the workplace. We value the opportunity to honor our future business leaders in awarding these scholarships. 3 scholarships have been awarded this year by our Rotary North Coast Ethics in Business Committee through donations made by our corporate sponsors, Summit State Bank and Spalding, McCullough, and Tansel LLP. Our first recipient, Wesley Dung, is a senior at Ukiah High School. Wesley has been involved not only in service to the community, but is also a small business operator, where he recently was challenged in ethics when his supplier, without a return policy, delivered a product that was inferior. But Wesley met this challenge. Wesley is a member of his high school's Interact Club and is a recently attendee at RYLA, Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. It's my pleasure to award this $500 scholarship to Wesley Dung. And now, Wesley will say a few words.
Hi, can everyone hear me? All right, cool. Hi, I'm Wesley Duong, a senior at Ukiah High School, and I'm very honored to receive this Ethics in Business Scholarship Award. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to all our Rotarians in District 5130 and the sponsoring business, Spalding McColl and Tanzel LLP. I'm currently in the process of applying for college, so if I look stressed, that's probably why. UPenn is my top choice, but I'm also considering closer options like UC Berkeley. I plan on majoring in business and pursuing a career in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley, and congratulations. Our next recipient is Fiona Geminer. Fiona attends Casa Grande High School in Petaluma and is an active member of her Interact Club. During this past summer, in discussions with her online teacher, she was made aware that student cheating had skyrocketed. Rather than simply calling out those that cheated, she met this ethical challenge by creating a peer review system for assignments. This not only created a more fair learning environment, but enhanced both understanding and learning for all the students. It's my pleasure to award this $500 scholarship to Fiona Geminer. And now we'll hear from Fiona a few words.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Fiona Geminer, and I'm a senior at Casa Grande High School. I'm here today with my parents, Ken and Eve Geminer, and I'm very thankful to be accepting this scholarship today. I would like to give a huge thank you to the Rotarians of District 5130 for hosting this event and supporting me, as well as Spalding, McCulloch, and Tanzel LLP for sponsoring my scholarship. I read on your website that you focus on supporting and giving back to the community, and I really value that, so I'm proud to be sponsored by your business. So a little bit about me. I'm a classically trained ballet dancer, and I'm the president of the Interact Club at my high school. I plan on attending a 4-year university and studying hospitality and tourism management with the intention of becoming an event planner after college. I'm excited for the planning and traveling aspects of this career, but I'm especially excited to implement ethical values into my future workplace and to help others to the best of my ability as you are doing for me today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Fiona. And again, congratulations. Our third and final recipient this year is Serendipity Welsh. Serendipity attends Arcata High School. Not only is Serendipity a member of the Interact Club, but she also attended RYLA this past year. She is also involved with her school newspaper. She recently met a challenge of ethical reporting when crafting a story on racism at her school. The topic presented several ethical dilemmas, but Serendipity learned through this experience that it was not simply about calling out names or bad behavior, but realizing that mistakes are made, and her role as a reporter was to educate others. She writes, rather than name dropping and accusing, we made the ethical decision to educate our school, hopefully preventing a similar occurrence from happening in the future. I am pleased to present this $1,000 scholarship to Serendipity. And now Serendipity will say a few words.
Hi, my name is Sari Welsh. I'm a senior at Arcata High School and the president of Interact Club, which is a community service club through Rotary. I am also goalkeeper for the Arcata High School girls soccer team and co-editor-in-chief of Arcata High School's newspaper, The Pepper Box. Thank you to all the Rotarians in District 5130, Jim O'Grady, and Summit State Bank for the Business and Ethics Scholarship. I am incredibly honored to have been chosen, and while I'm still unsure where I'll be attending college, my top choices right now are Pomona College, Pitzer College, and University of Chicago. I plan to major in political science with a minor in journalism and hope to have this opportunity to study abroad. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Serendipity. And once again, congratulations to you and all our scholarship winners. And thank you again to our sponsors, Summit State Bank, Spalding, McCullough, and Tansel LLP, and our North Coast Ethics and Business Award committee members who made these scholarships possible. Robert?
Thank you, Jim. What amazing stories from those future young business leaders. I'm sure that Professor Schatz will try to recruit them to Stanford School of Business. But as the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Napa Valley College, I hope that you'll make Napa your first stop on your educational journey. I am delighted to announce that the winner of the small business category of the first annual North Coast Rotary Ethics and Business Award is Lunchette. Congratulations, Lunchette. The finalists in the nonprofit category are Coast Central Credit Union, Nuestra Comunidad, and Providence St. Joseph Santa Rosa Memorial Hospital. Let's hear from those nonprofit organizations.
Hello, my name is Alma Bowen. I am the founder and executive director of NC, or Nuestra Comunidad. Nuestra Comunidad is a local nonprofit organization in Sonoma County that was birthed after the Tubbs fire experience. 18 years into my 911 dispatching career, I worked the night of the Tubbs fire here in Sonoma County Fire and Medical Dispatch. And what I experienced that night changed my trajectory, what I was going to do. But what I found that night was that our community was not prepared and that certain populations were vulnerable. So in 2018, we focused on founding NC, Nuestra Comunidad. That's a nonprofit organization that would dedicate itself to building resilience in the community, all of our underserved populations. But also, we wanted to extend everything that we do to all community members. NC, or Nuestra Comunidad, was intentionally named to be inclusive, and that is the lens that we use. So because NC is deeply rooted in our core values of collaboration, commitment, community, and equity, to me, running NC ethically is all about developing trust and maintaining it so that we can maintain our reputation as trusted messengers. Because we service the most vulnerable populations, being trustworthy and being a place where people can come and feel safe, where they can seek services and programs without feeling that they're going to be underserved or overlooked is important. Our organization's ethics work to promote integrity among our employees and to gain the trust of our stakeholders, and that includes community members, community organizations, partner organizations, and agencies. So with NC, we strive to demonstrate honesty, integrity, promise keeping, trustworthiness, loyalty, fairness, concern for others, and respect of others. Integrity, ethics, it's a core value at NC, and it's how we do what we do every day.
Hi, my name is Anita Ho, and I'm the Regional Director of Ethics for Providence, which is formerly known as St. Joseph Health. And we have a particular focus on those who are poor and vulnerable. In terms of our mission and values, and one of the things that I feel really proud of being part of Providence is how we are a mission-driven organization. So our core values include compassion, dignity, excellence, integrity, and we also very much focus on justice. And I think justice, especially given a lot of social unrest in the last couple of years and how hard many of our community members have been struggling throughout COVID and difficult times. And I think these are really good values and pillars for us to be grounded in what we do. What it generally means is that when we think about ethical decision making, whether it's at the patient's bedside or in terms of thinking about allocating scarce resources, so it can mean protective equipment, vaccines earlier in this year, or right now in some areas we may be thinking about hospital beds when there may be surges in different parts of the county or the country. Then we think about how do we make sure that we are serving our communities, especially those who are poor and vulnerable. Because we are a healing ministry, very often when we think about investment, the return for us is really, are we making the community safer, healthier, and more equitable? So I think that's part of how we see the work that we do. And when we think about what does ethical value mean for our organization, even though a big part of my work and some of my colleagues' work on the ethics committee is to deal with dilemmas about end-of-life care or other really distressing situations, I think a big part of what we really think about ethical organization and ethics in business is really about how do we have ethical values in everything that we do on a daily basis. How do we treat our employees? How do we treat all our caregivers? And how do we treat those who may otherwise not have access to healthcare, including a lot of people in our community who may also have no housing or unstable housing. When we think about ethics in business, it's really about the day-to-day value, how we treat each other, how do we make sure that people feel supported, especially during the time of stress and distress, such as what we're going through right now.
The cornerstone of Coast Central is people helping people, which is the essence of our core values, both in and outside the organization. Everything we do must be always fair, inclusive, and considerate to all, especially the unbanked or financially underserved. Our mission statement: to be the primary financial institution for members by providing high-quality financial services at competitively favorable rates, consistent with maintaining our financial strength. Simply, it's having a sense of what is right and wrong and having the integrity to do what is right, especially when under pressure to do otherwise. For example, we are here to serve our membership. They come first, but not at the expense of staff's safety. When the pandemic struck, we could not close our doors. Too many in this community depended on us for financial services. So we developed safety protocols to protect our members and staff while conducting business. At the time, we were not an SBA lender, but saw the need to become one. With the help of our local congressman, we were able to receive swift SBA approval and immediately began helping over 400 businesses maintain 656 jobs. Ethics also means doing what's right for staff. For those who were able to come into the offices to work, received what we call essential services pay, which amounted to $4 more per hour. We also employ many who have young children, and it was a challenge for them who now suddenly had to homeschool. We provided as much flexibility as possible so they could achieve both, take care of their families, and know they had a job to come back to. In our business, ethics is everything. We are all about trust, transparency, fairness to all, and compassion for others in our communities. We are all about people helping people, and our practices and programs help outline acceptable behaviors to help motivate employees to perform their roles with integrity.
Thank you to those outstanding organizations providing extremely valuable services to our communities. You can see why we added a nonprofit category to the Rotary Ethics in Business Awards this year. Before we learn the identity of the winner of that award, first we'll hear from William Rousseau, who will tell us a little bit about our very special guest speaker. William?
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon. I'm William Rousseau, the 2021 Rotary District 5130 Ethics Chairperson. Thank you all for joining us via Zoom meeting today. I'm honored to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Professor Kenneth Schatz. Kenneth W. Schatz is the David S. and Ann M. Barlow Professor of Political Economy at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. He was an undergrad and a grad student at Stanford. And back when he was in high school, in the late 1980s, he attended Camp Ryla. For you non-Rotarians out there, that is the Rotary Youth Leadership Award Camp. And it was in District 5170. In his academic research, he uses game theory to analyze how elections and political institutions influence policy choices made by government officials. At the Stanford Graduate School of Business, he teaches the core MBA class on leading with values. And he also has a forthcoming general interest book on the topic with his friend Neil Malhotra. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ken Schatz.
Thank you so much, William, for the kind introduction. So I'm going to talk, I guess my talk is in three snippets here, and I'm going to start off with about 10 minutes of introductory remarks, and I'm going to go all professorial and share my screen because that's what people like me are prone to doing. So let me share screen here. Oh, oops, let's see. Host has disabled participant screen sharing. So can whoever is running the Zoom enable screen sharing? And in the meantime, I'll start talking. So if you think about leading with values, there are a lot of different topics that we could talk about. You know, we could think about what values do you hold? How do you interact with other people? What's the relationships between values, ethics, and the law, and things like that. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about two sort of big scandals, actually. And with the lesson I'm going to try to draw from this actually is how to go about living by our own values. Okay, looks like I can share now. There we go. Okay, so I will be able to share screen. And also to talk about how to design organizations in order to make it so that people within the organization can do a good job of living by their values. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. But before I get into that, I'd actually like to quickly gather some data from you guys that I'm going to use in one of the later parts of my talk. So if you could grab your phone or your computer that you're on and really quickly just spend 1 minute and go to tinyurl.com/3ARSRYTU. And I'm going to drop that into chat as well for people so that it'll be there when I move off this screen. tinyurl.com/3ARSRY2U. Okay, there's the link there. If you could go there, it'll literally just take you 1 minute to fill out this survey that'll give me some data that I'll use in a later part of this chat. So I'm going to talk about actually a couple substantial scandals that occurred, and then draw some lessons from cognitive social moral psychology, and then talk about implications for leadership and for individual decision making. So the first of the scandals that I want to talk about briefly is the Health South accounting fraud scandal. So this is a first big accounting fraud scandal that becomes public after the Enron scandal and after Sarbanes-Oxley. It's $3 billion worth of fraud. Nobody would say that it was an okay thing to do. What happens is this company's trying to look like it's growing really rapidly. They start with small amounts of revenue recognition manipulation, and then they gradually ramp up over time to the point that they have thousands of completely fake entries on the book. They're lying to their auditors. Bunch of people plead guilty to this. Several of them go to prison for it. The CEO gets acquitted of this, but later goes to prison for bribing the governor of the state of Alabama. And you might wonder, like, well, you know, what caused this to happen? And it seems that part of what was going on at Health South was that there were some incentive problems that you had. And I'm kind of an economist by training, so I like focusing on incentives. The senior executives had options, so they're trying to prop up the stock price. Their internal auditors were generally sort of underqualified for their jobs and kind of had a big incentive not to lose their jobs. And their external auditors were actually, although they weren't allowed to sell consulting services after Sarbanes-Oxley, they were selling some other sort of odd accounting services to the company Health South and making a lot of money off that. So maybe they had kind of an incentive to look the other way when it came to the fraud. But the thing is, there's misaligned incentives in lots of situations, not just at Health South. So you might think that, well, what was going on is their CEO, that's this guy, Richard Scrushy here. I tried to find like the meanest looking picture I could find of him. Maybe he was a villain. And I think this guy is actually a pretty legitimately nasty person in a lot of aspects of his character. But there's a lot of people that were involved in the Health South scandal. They had at least a dozen senior executives who wound up doing things that were clearly morally and legally problematic. So another scandal you've surely heard of is the Theranos scandal. So this is a Stanford startup, go Stanford, right? So Theranos had this great idea for blood testing using just a pinprick. They get a whole bunch of funding. Lots of VCs didn't invest in them, but some did. They got this board that was comprised of like a set of illuminous professors from Stanford and Hoover Institution and stuff like that. And it was basically, they had this technology that didn't work. They're totally faking their testing. They're running on machines supplied by another company, not on their actual own machines. They're always overstating revenues. They're deceiving regulators, which is a really big deal in healthcare. Ultimately, this winds up being uncovered, and the value of the company goes from $10 billion to $0 in a rather short amount of time. So it's like the crash of a unicorn. And you might look at what happened with Theranos and say, well, there's some incentive problems. And there definitely were some incentive problems. So there's this issue that, investors in Silicon Valley expect hockey stick growth and, you got to take over the world if I'm going to consider investing in you. They had a bunch of board members who actually were not expert on blood testing. They were like, some of them were like ex-military, folks like that. And they were expert on some things, but they didn't have expertise on what the company was actually doing. And they didn't really have much ability to figure out what was going on with the company's technology. And they didn't have much incentive to sort of admit their own lack of expertise. So you might look at that and say, okay, well, that's what caused the problem at HealthSouth. And obviously, we also currently are in the middle of the trial of Elizabeth Holmes and, Sunny Balwani, also, be on trial at some point. And so you might say, well, what's going on is they got some villains at the top of the company. It's Elizabeth and Sunny, they're bad people. And so that's what caused the problems at HealthSouth. But actually, a lot of other people in Theranos knew of and participated in the fraud. Now, not everyone did. Actually, the grandson of George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, did not participate in the fraud and actually called them out on it. But a lot of people did, and at least didn't stand up and do something about it. So I don't think that incentives and villains, which are kind of like the easy stories to tell about misbehavior in the world, I don't think they cover everything. And I think we really got to look beyond villainy and problematic incentives, not just in HealthSouth and Theranos, but in all sorts of other situations where people do stuff that's out of step with their values, and say, well, what else could be causing it? And what I'm going to get into in the later parts of what I'll be talking about during this session will be some things having to do with our human psychology. And our human psychology, not the human psychology of the bad guys, but the human psychology of all of us. So that's where I'll be going next. When we return, I'll be talking about the key themes from cognitive, social, and moral psychology. So with that as the cliffhanger, I'll leave it at that and hand things back off.
Thank you, Professor Schatz. I hope you all enjoyed the first of 3 segments of his talk today. Please use the questions on the program. If you have anything for him, we'll get to those at the end. Next up, we have the nonprofit award, and that'll be by Robert.
Thank you, William. It is my pleasure to announce that the winner of the nonprofit organization category for the Rotary Ethics and Business Award is Coast Central Credit Union. Congratulations, Coast. Our finalists in the medium business category are Rivertown Feed, Slice of Humboldt Pie, and Thanksgiving Coffee. Perhaps there's a little bit of a theme there. Let's hear from these businesses.
Hi, I'm Donald Benson, president and owner of Rivertown Feed and Pet here in Petaluma. We started our business 2001 of January after Bar Feed has burnt down, and at the time, my Tammy, my wife, and I took over the business from Bar Building this business was built on people of the community of Petaluma. We had a reason why we put things back together is we had a customer come in one time the day of the fire, and his fire was burning down. And he came in, come on, Don, let's get this thing going again. So, you know, that sticks in your head sometimes, and people want you here in the community. So building trust in the community, making a community, being a part of a community, I think is huge. Like I said, moral ethics, you got to have, you just do the right thing for your community. And that's what I'm looking to do, and our employees and our family and everything else here. We love to be a part of the community. I'm honored, very honored to have been nominated for this award. I've been touched by it. I've been here for 42 years at this spot, being part and growing up with this community and watching generations come to this store. So in that aspect, I appreciate that. But I think honesty, doing the right things for customers, doing the right thing for the people, doing the right thing for the community, I think that's my purpose is. As far as I go, that's where we're at here.
My name is Lavender Grace Cinnamon, and I am a sustainable ecology advocate and community outreach coordinator for Thanksgiving Coffee Company. We are a specialty coffee roaster operating on the Mendocino coast and family owned and operated for the past 50 years. We use coffee as a medium for social, environmental, and economic justice. We are not just a cup, but a just cup, both at countries of origin and at our local communities. Our core value is to be the most sustainable company that we can possibly be, and that means we still have more work to do. We are continually inspired by the company that we keep, and we are one of over 4,000 certified B Corps in 77 countries around the world, using business as a force for good. And we're dedicated to improve the quality of life for all beings on the planet. And through our many organic, fair trade initiatives, including the Smithsonian Bird Friendly certification for shade-grown coffee. And we launched the Be Bold Alliance as a pilot project that works to restore biodiversity and food security through pollinator protection. And we are creating a regenerative youth leaders program to help create sustainability leaders in our schools who will be able to learn about regenerative gardening and pollinator survival and intentional creativity to dream into the world that we want to see. An ethical business is part of the core fabric of a healthy society, and one that improves the quality of life for all beings within both the business sector and also in our environment, and also in the emotional well-being of our communities. It's very important to have ethics that you can trust and have a solid foundation to work from to continue to improve the essential pieces of what it means to live a good, healthy life, and also to lift up those who are in more need and those who are suffering and underserved in the community, and identifying who's doing good work in the world and how can we support them. And we do that with our coffee as the medium for that.
I'm Kristen Thompson. This is Amber Saba. We are the owners of Slice of Humboldt Pie. We're in Arcata. We are a sweet and savory pie shop, restaurant, and we do make product for other local businesses and grocery stores.
We have been in business now since 2013 and have expanded into a couple of locations. The mission of Slice of Humboldt Pie is a simple one. It is to provide a quality product
while giving great service in a safe and welcoming atmosphere for any guest or staff member that walks through that door.
Trusted, we respect everybody. We work as a large family unit where our belief really is we don't ever say that's not my job. We work together for the common goal of our mission statement to bring that product to the customer while having a place where we can all just get along, be respected, forget the other stresses outside the doors. We all support from within and without of the business and just really try and create a long-lasting place where people want to come. Ethics in business means everything to us. It means trust and honesty. Without those two things, I don't think you can actually have a successful business. I think that to be able to provide a trustworthy place that does the right thing means a lot to the employee themselves. And I think the customer can see that as well, having that openness and relationship with community and staff and patrons and yourself, starting there and letting that shine out to everyone else.
Thanks to those excellent businesses, I think you've made me hungry and thirsty. But meanwhile, before we learn the identity of the winner in this category, William will take us back for more from Professor Schatz. William?
Thank you, Robert. Next up, we have part 2 of Professor Schatz's presentation. Please remember to put your questions in the questions tab that's in Zoom, and then we'll be able to answer those in the 3rd segment. So back to Professor Ken Schatz.
Thank you so much, William. And I have to say, I feel very self-conscious because I feel just seeing, people who are so deserving of being honored and recognized for amazing things that they're doing. And I feel like I'm standing between you and hearing about more people who are being honored and recognized, and also, hearing who won particular awards. So I will hopefully not be too boring along the way. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about lessons from psychology. So here we go. And what do the psychologists have to say about us, the humans, and how we, approach things as sort of like moral decision makers, and how we perceive the world, and how we perceive ourselves in the world as moral decision makers? Well, the first thing that they know, and this goes back to some very old research done by a former neighbor of mine, Al Hasdorf, who passed away about a decade ago, is that we have very strong in-group biases. So, for example, if you consider this, 2 stills from a famous video of maybe the most famous play in college football history, I look at this and I see crystal clear that this was a forward lateral by Cal in the 1982 big game, and also that the Cal, one of the Cal guys earlier in the play, I know very well because I saw it on video at some point, that his knee was down, and that's just unambiguously the case. Whereas, and I went to Stanford, right? I'm a Stanford person, but people from Cal know clear as day exactly the opposite is true. There is no way this is a forward lateral. There is no way his knee was down. And, and what was the band doing on the field anyway? So we all have, and we know this about ourselves as sports fans, but it's also true of us as humans. We have an in-group bias. We also have a bias in favor of ourselves as individuals. So for this, I have some evidence on you guys, or from you guys actually. I asked you to rate yourselves relative to other people attending this talk in terms of a variety of positive attributes. And you, on average, thought you're at about the 54th percentile in height, 50th percentile in terms of athletic ability. So really well calibrated on estimating those things. On the interviewing skills, quantitative skills, and independence of mind, you on average put yourselves at the 70th percentile or so. Remember, these are percentiles, so the average relative to other people in a group has to be 50. But on average, you're putting yourselves up at the 70th percentile. And on ethical standards, you're on average rating yourselves at the 88th percentile relative to each other. So congratulations, you're above average, and especially above average on average relative to each other when it comes to ethical standards. And I say this like I'm kind of teasing you, but I've used this survey for about 100 different audiences. I use this with our MBAs. I've used this with entrepreneurs in East Africa. I've used it with libertarians in Utah. I've used it with a group of female business leaders, groups of CEOs from around the world, prosecutors, all sorts of groups. And they all show exactly the same pattern. In fact, the pattern is so predictable that I actually order these various attributes knowing that the average self-assessments are typically going to be increasing as we go down this list, because it's the same basic pattern all the time. The one group that I haven't used this with that I would really like to use this with is this faculty of the Stanford Graduate School of Business where I teach. And I think that on some things like quantitative skills, we might rank ourselves on average above the 100th percentile relative to each other. So this is just totally normal that you on average think, well of yourselves in terms of ethical things. And maybe it's a good thing that we think highly of ourselves. This is just makes us feel better about ourselves as human beings if we feel like we're good people. But there is a risk of a downside, and that has to do with some work that my colleagues Benoit Monin and Dale Miller talked about in terms of moral credentialing. And the basic idea that they have, and they've done this as experimental psychological research, is that if people, you give them an opportunity to feel that they're good people, they kind of feel like they have some license or right to do something that might be a little bit sketchy or a little bit bad. That might be especially problematic if we, just by our cognitive architecture, tend to be especially prone to thinking that we're really good people. And I think this has implications for mission-driven organizations. So it's wonderful to be part of an organization that has a sense of mission and a sense of purpose. That is great. But at times, it can potentially create an opportunity for people to give themselves a bit of an extra fudge factor. So Elizabeth Holmes, actually speaking here at the Graduate School of Business shortly before her company collapsed, we put her up on the big stage celebrating her company and honoring her, talked about how they're changing the reality in our healthcare system, really helping people discover that they had diseases before it was too late. And maybe the fact that she and others believed they were changing healthcare for the better meant that some people felt it was okay that they were doing some stuff that was rather shady. This also can be true for all sorts of organizations, schools, religious organizations, militaries, and universities. So I think, I'm part of a mission-driven organization. And I always think that as part of any mission-driven organization, one should be conscious of the possibility that we're giving ourselves a license to do stuff that's out of step with our values. The next thing about human psychology that I want to talk about is the fact that this guy's a myth. And he's a really misleading myth. The Lone Ranger is a horribly inaccurate description of how we, the humans, go about making decisions. Now, it's how a lot of us in Western cultures, in the Western United States, learn to talk about ourselves, but it's not an accurate description of us, the humans. There's a lot of important research by social psychologists on this, the most famous of which is the Milgram electric shock experiment, which many of you have heard of, but which I will have a take on, which is probably a little bit different from what you've heard before. So the basic gist of the Milgram electric shock experiment, you show up for an experiment at Yale University and they say, we've studied the effects of rewards on learning. We now need to study the effects of punishments on learning. We're going to take you and we're going to randomize which of you two people is going to be the teacher, which of you is going to be the learner. And the real subject who's the S in this picture here, gets assigned the role of teacher, and they're told, well, the learner, who's actually part of the experimental team, is an accomplice. That's why it's A there. You're going to give them electric shocks if they make some mistakes. And they're going to start with 15-volt electric shocks, and they're going to go up to 450-volt electric shocks. And just in case you don't understand what that means and what voltage is, it's labeled things like extreme intensity shock, danger severe shock, and XXX. And so what do the experimental subjects do? And it turns out that about 65% of people go all the way to 450 volts of electric shocks. And so there's the question of, what do we make of that? What does this mean about us, the humans? Now, they don't do this easily. They don't do this happily. They're very upset about it. Many of them are traumatized. In particular, the researchers who are running this did not properly debrief the experimental subjects. So it was especially traumatizing for some of them. But, you might take a lesson from this is to say, well, it looks like some of the people gave hardly any electric shock. They stopped even before they got to the moderate electric shock there. And I think that being honest, probably for most of us, it's probably about a 65% chance that we would have gone all the way to 450 volts of electric shocks. Another takeaway that people sometimes have of this is that we're really horrible human beings. And we're terrible. And I think it is important to put this in context that the researchers who are doing this, at least some of them are Jewish, and they're doing the research shortly after the Holocaust. So they're trying to understand how humans can do monstrously bad things. That is part of the learning, but really, it's not quite the right thing to learn that we're horrible from this experiment. That's the takeaway I had when I first learned about it when I was an undergraduate. Really, the accurate thing to take away from it is that we can be strongly influenced by social context. So it's actually having the experimenter right there in the room next to the subject. The experimenter is wearing the trappings of authority with a white lab coat at Yale University. There's even things in the design of the experiment like the randomization of who is the learner and who is the teacher. The fact that they don't initially say like, okay, you're going to have someone memorize some words and they make a mistake, you're going to shock them to death with a 450 volt shock. Of course, no one's actually getting shocked here, just so you know. It starts with 15 volts and then 30, then 45. And if I stop at 60 and say I'm not going to go to 75, what does that say about me? That I went to 60. All those little details of the design of the social situation are very powerful in inducing compliance with this horrible sort of behavior. And I think it's useful to think about some of the scandals that I mentioned earlier in terms of these lessons from psychology. So I'll just do this in terms of the Health House scandal, where I had the opportunity to have the former CFO of the company interviewed after he got out of prison. And Aaron Beam, who comes across as just like a normal guy, totally normal guy. He exhibits all sorts of self-serving biases. He says, you know, you kind of just assumed that everyone was cooking their books. Someone else in my company, this other finance guy, Bill, cooked the books that night. I wasn't actually cooking the books directly. You know, what Health South does, it's sort of like the Milgram experiment. They don't immediately do $3 billion of accounting fraud. They do little bits of it at the start. They gradually ramp up. Then there's other situational factors like time pressures and the sense of authority and obedience to his co-founder, but also boss, Richard Scrushy, who's this kind of like dynamic and intimidating guy. And so I think that, you know, some of these things that the psychologists have identified as sort of weaknesses in our human psychology show up in some of the misbehavior that we see when people do things that are not wrong. And this should be really disturbing. This should be deeply disturbing to you. Because I think for those of us, I think all of us can look at our lives and say, there's things that I've done that were right. There's things that I've done that were wrong, that were out of step with my values. But I haven't done horrible stuff like Health South or Theranos or things like that. But is that because I'm just a good person? Or actually would it be the case if you put me in that situation and had those pressures on me, given my human psychology, all of our human psychology, maybe I would have been capable of doing some bad stuff. That's pretty disturbing. But I don't want to leave on a disturbing note because I actually think there's very positive implications of this as well. Because social influence and authority are actually just neutral features of us, the humans. Yeah, they can lead to conformity and obedience and doing some bad stuff. But social influence is part of teamwork. And respect for and following authority is necessary for leadership to actually be possible. So I'm going to give some more sort of positive examples of the ways that these things of our human psychology can really work for good. Starting with a difficult and challenging but really impressive example, which is this is one of the classic photos called the Magnificent 11 of the combat engineers, early waves going ashore at D-Day in Normandy. So these guys know they're almost all going to die. Their probability of surviving as the initial wave going ashore at Omaha Beach is really, really low. Why do they do this? They're doing something truly heroic. It's not that they're part of some greatest generation that's better than the rest of all the rest of us. It's rather they're put in the right situation. The research on military shows that actually it's cohesion and a sense of being in it with one's buddies that drives people to do things. And they're following the legitimate authority of their commanding officer who's saying go, 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 and who's leading the charge is actually probably the most likely of them to die. So you put normal people Actually turned out that one of my neighbors was in these photos. I learned after I'd been teaching them for a while. He just passed away a few years ago, almost 100 years old. Bill Kays, former dean of our School of Engineering. You're just a normal guy. But you put him in the right situation. He did something wonderful. And he survived too. He was very fortunate. Another example from the US Civil Rights Movement. This is the 4 young gentlemen who started the sit-in at a Woolworths in Greensboro, North Carolina. And why did they do this? How did they make it happen? Well, they knew each other. They were tightly connected to each other. It's the fact that they were in it together that made it possible for them to do it. And that's what, in general, the research on the civil rights movement has shown, is that people sticking with it was because of their connections with people around them, not so much because they could articulate perfectly the ideology and aspirations and goals, but it's the people that they were in it with and their connections there. This is true. It matters at companies too. Actually, that's the next slide. Sorry. It's also true in religious and community organizations. So I don't happen to be a religious person, but I have a lot of admiration for many religious groups that have expectations about what is good and appropriate conduct within our group and what is the right way to behave in relationships with people outside of the group. That really is using social influence from others within the religious community and authority from leaders and from a higher power for good ends. This is also part of the story of how companies function as organizations. So some of you may have heard the great This American Life story about the Numi factory, which was a GM factory initially in the 1970s, and it was horrible. How do we know it was horrible? Because the union leader at the plant later said we were, quote, the worst workforce in the US auto industry. That's pretty damning if a union leader is saying that about the other folks they're working with. There's people sabotaging cars. There's all sorts of illegal and awful stuff going on within the factory. GM closes the factory, fires everyone. Soon thereafter, reopens the factory and hires 80% of the same people, the same human beings, but reworks the organization. Actually gives them more autonomy, responsibility for the quality of the build of the cars, gives them the possibility of stopping the line, and actually challenges them to work together in small groups to match the standards that Toyota was having for its production facilities in Japan. And these same people who were the worst workforce in the US auto industry immediately start churning out some pretty high quality Chevy Novas and Toyota Corollas. And that's using social influence and authority for good purposes. And this is generally true in a lot of companies and organizations. You got a business that is having an impact on the world that's basically positive. Not true of every business, but true of a lot of businesses. And also actively works to foster a good corporate culture and strong employee morale. That is an organization that is using conformity, authority, and social pressure for good ends. Okay, I'm trying to think on timing. Can I ask you, William, should I have like a few more. Why don't I pause now and then I'll talk a little bit and then take a few questions at the very end. So I will say that where I'm going next is the question of how to design and lead organizations to use social pressures for good purposes. So that's where I'm going to go next in the third little snippet of this talk.
Great. Thank you, Professor Schatz. Before we go back to his third segment, let's bring up Robert for the announcement of the award.
Thank you, William. I'm happy to report that the winner of the Medium Business Award for the North Coast Rotary Business Ethics Award is Thanksgiving Coffee. Congratulations, Thanksgiving. I just want to remind everyone to submit your questions for Professor Schatz in the chat. He'll be looking at those to an opportunity to respond to them in the final segment. But meanwhile, we'd like to tell you about the nominees in the large business category. Our nominees in the large business category are Better Homes and Gardens Wine Country Group, Cousteau French Bakery, and Oliver's Market. Let's hear from those businesses.
My name is Sarah Cummings, and I work in public relations and community relations for Oliver's Markets. We are based in Sonoma County, California, with 4 stores, along with a warehouse and business office. We've been in business since 1988. Our goal for Oliver's is to be the finest grocer in Sonoma County. Also, of course, our hyper-local focus, which we feel is probably the strongest of any grocer in Sonoma County. We are a social purpose corporation, so we have a triple bottom line, honoring, along with the economics of a business decision, our employees, the community, and the environment in every business decision we make. We offer a fun, diverse, and welcoming to all environment in our stores. It's in our mission statement to be that way. It's very important to us. And we also mention in our mission statement our interest in having our employees maintain a work-life balance as much as possible. And we value integrity at every turn at Oliver's Market. We're an employee-owned company. Our founder, Steve Moss, chose to do this for his employees rather than selling the company to a bigger corporation to honor and reward everybody who helped build the company into what it is today. I really like the honoring of everybody's individual personalities and walks of life, and how we all sort of meld together here for the greater good. It's, for us, ethics means, more job satisfaction for our employees. We try to be consistent in everything we do. I think one reason we have managed to survive and thrive at Oliver's is our ethics. I think we have really strong vendor relationships, consistency, and a focus on the community, and integrity in what we do has been essential to the success of Oliver's Market.
Happy with Costeau French Bakery, based out of Healdsburg. Costeau French Bakery has been a Healdsburg tradition since 1923. And we serve our community. We push carbs. That's our big thing, is providing our communities with great baked goods throughout the entire North Bay region. Our company is largely focused on empowering our employees to essentially act within the framework of our core values. And those core values that we believe in are quickly summarized in their community, service, quality, and family. I asked a couple of my managers this afternoon what it meant to them, what ethics in business meant to them. They said, do what you say you're going to do. Do what you say you're going to do, and do the right thing. We also demonstrate to our employees that we provide a safe environment for them to be in. We care for them. We make the workplace fun, and we set expectations. And all that rolls over into providing a great work environment that our guests from near and far get to experience, especially in today's environment where people have many things competing, where we have news headlines daily that are bombarding us with challenges throughout our society. I think that in particular, small business has a unique opportunity to lead by example and to train and to pull out the best in people and to serve their communities well. So here at Costeau, just as a recap, we do the right thing. We lead by example. We have our core values of family, community, quality, and service. And we aim to train our team to be empowered and to make decisions that are in the best interest of our guests based on those core values that are embedded within our culture.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Snedeker, and this is Randy Kaufman. And we're partners in Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, the Wine Country Group. We want to thank the Rotary Clubs of the North Bay for this recognition. We feel quite honored to be named one of 3 finalists in this award about ethics. Real estate sales, we have 11 offices and about 150 agents throughout the North Bay wine country. And we're responsible for seeing that all 150 of our agents operate in an ethical manner. We view ourselves as transition managers. People usually when they're buying or selling a house are going through a transition. Our community values include respect, courage, curiosity, high expectations, honesty, trust, integrity, adopting change. And Better Homes and Gardens has this little statement of values called PAGE. And it stands for passion, authenticity, inclusion, growth, and excellence.
It's always doing the right thing, whether it costs you financially, maybe costs your ego here and there, but it's so important to always do the right thing by the consumer and the people that we work with. I say that you can, by the time that you're 5 years old, you know the difference between right and wrong, according to child development experts. And Gary and I can teach you about real estate, but we can't teach you right and wrong. You either have it or you don't. If you don't, again, this is not the right place for you to work. So again, ethics in business, it's really simple. Do the right thing, always.
Thanks again, and we want to congratulate all the other parties that were recognized today, and it's a pleasure to be included in this group. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of those businesses for participating in the nomination ceremony and taking the time to tell you a little bit about what ethics in business means to them. You can see that we had a very difficult job in selecting the winners of each of these awards. Before we tell you about the winner of the large business award category, William is going to take us back to Professor Schatz for a few more remarks and a question and answer session. William?
Thank you, Robert. So for those of you out in Zoom land, we have 3 more things to go on our agenda. But first off, let's get Professor Schatz back, and he can wrap up his presentation and take some questions and answers. So with that, Professor Schatz.
Thank you so much, William. So I am back. Let me get this back up here. So yes, I wanted to talk about and I think this echoes what several people have said over the course of their talks. It's very interesting to see people talk about like the details of what this means to us living by our values as a company, as an organization in practice. And I think what I'm going to say is going to resonate with some of the things that people have said. And this is really about how to set things up to get people within an organization to be the best versions of themselves as much as possible, and thinking about who are the sorts of people one wants to associate with in one's business and work career. And I think when thinking about organizational design, this is partially a story of incentives. So a lot of the time when we see people doing things that are problematic, it's actually because there's incentive problems that cause it. So the recent Wells Fargo scandal, there was combinations of carrots and sticks that induced over 5,000 people to engage in fraud. And when you got over 5,000 people in an organization engaging in fraud, that means something about the design of the organization is problematic. And I think this is basically that Wells Fargo did recognize there was a lot of money to be made on cross-selling people from one banking product to another. And then they incentivized that in ways that induced people or encouraged people to do fraud who maybe might not have if they were operating in a different incentive system. And I think the importance of this is in a lot of lines of work, it is useful to have high-powered incentives. That can be very motivating for a lot of people. It's not the only thing that motivates people. But like as a kind of an economist by training, I think, high-powered incentives, that makes sense a lot of the time, people working on commission and things like that. But if people have high-powered incentives, there need to be checks on possible things that they might do that could be problematic. And those checks can include things like audits, or it can include things like providing information to people who might be wronged by someone who's reacting to their high-powered incentives. But it's not just a story of incentives. Also, really effective organizational decision-making is about roles. And so a lot of the time when you see, things go wrong, it's in organizations where dissent was not allowed, where people were not allowed to raise questions and say, hey, are we really doing the right thing? And to have those conversations. And actually, a tragic example of this was this Massey Energy mine disaster about a decade ago in West Virginia, where it seemed that people were being actively told not to speak up when there were safety issues arising. And effective organizations make dissent possible and even encourage it. So those of you who've read the history of President Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Kennedy learned some lessons from the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a disaster, right? And one of those things he learned was, you don't want to get everyone all saying, oh yeah, we all agree, we're all doing this, totally everyone's all in on the same thing. He tried to set up his advisors so they would disagree with each other and have people assigned the role of questioning what they were doing. And that's useful for organizational decision making in general and for helping organizations live according to their values. But I think, maybe the most important lesson has to do with individual choices, which is I think it's useful to always realize that we tend to underestimate how much social context shapes who we are and how we act. And that means that when we find ourselves in situations that make us feel uncomfortable, it's really good to try to get some distance from the situation and to try to say, hold on, what are the pressures that are on me here? How can I cause myself not to react to those pressures? And then, also when thinking about, and I like this in the last talk about, who do you want to do business with? Who do you want your employees to be? Those sorts of questions are really important because the situations we put ourselves in and the people we choose to interact with can have a profound effect on our behavior. And so I want to end with a takeaway. The bottom line takeaway that I want to end with has to do with intentions and institutions. And the takeaway is it's great to have good intentions, and it's even better to have good institutions. So what do I mean by good institutions? I mean rules and norms that incentivize and encourage good behavior, which is part of what this whole program is about, that Rotary is doing actually. It's encouraging and rewarding and honoring people doing the right thing. And that is very powerful and important. And this is true actually at multiple different levels. If you're running an organization, it's important to have the rules, procedures, and incentives of the organization set up to help people within it be the best versions of themselves possible. It's true in societies. I'm always very happy when business leaders, you see this a lot at the national level, they're like, we're going to take the following steps to make the world a better place or do good for the world or things like that. And I'm always like, okay, that's great. I want to see you follow through on that. And I think follow through often actually requires having strong societal institutions, which can include things like governments that actually shape the incentives to ensure that companies are actually doing things that are in step with their values. And it's also true for ourselves, most subtly, as individuals, to say, how am I going to set up my life? I'm not assuming I'm going to always be the Lone Ranger regardless of the circumstance. But what situations do I want to put myself in? What are those institutions that are going to help me be the best version of myself that's possible? So that's the note that I want to end on in terms of my remarks. I see there's already some questions in chat. So let me close out this. And I'm really sorry, I mistakenly forgot to switch over the presentation and preview view there. So sorry about that. My bad. You would think after 18 months of teaching on Zoom, I'd be really smooth at that, but I guess I'm not. So let me look at some questions in chat. So Jose asks a couple of questions. Do I have any published work? Well, there's actually a forthcoming book, Leading with Values, that Neil Malhotra and I finished writing, but it's not available. We were hoping it would be available in time in October for this. It's going to be in print in February, and it'll be available as an ebook sooner. My other published work, honestly, is like a blizzard of mathematical game theory to understand political institutions. So I wouldn't recommend reading that unless you are a game theory nerd, which some of you probably are. But and Jose also asks, are there links between leading with values and organizational culture around diversity, equity, inclusion? And there are. And this is complicated. And it's complicated because I think different people have different values that relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly when it comes to hiring decisions. And people often have deeply held values that conflict with each other's core values on this. So for some people, they look at the world and they say fairness requires you have some sort of abstract neutral standard and you just hire everyone based on criteria relative to that standard. Maybe it's tests or something like that in university admissions. And other people look at things and they say, you know, the world historically hasn't been the most just place. There's been a lot of injustice. There's a lot of current injustice. And we should take those things into account when we're making a variety of decisions as an organization. It's not easy to square those with each other. There are deep tensions between those perspectives. And I think when people disagree about that sort of thing, and when people disagree about many things in our society nowadays, the common tendency is to assume, like, I'm in the right, whoever's in the wrong, they're bad people. And I think it's really useful to try to assume good intent on the part of people who disagree with me, and then say, okay, I recognize they disagree with me, but I'm going to try to understand where they're coming from in terms of deeply held, sincere values that they hold. That opens the door for a better conversation. And in terms of, and you also asked about organizational culture, Jose, and I would say that for organizations that decide that they want to do DEI initiatives, I think it's really important for them to think both about rules and institutions and organizational culture. And frankly, this is easier for businesses to do early on. So I've had some conversations with Barb Wise. She's now chief of DEI at Apple. She used to be chief of DEI at Intel. And you know, her perspective, so Intel did some major DEI initiatives that she led during her time there. And she said, you know, it's a lot easier to do that early on in an organization's lifetime rather than later on in an organization's lifetime. Okay, so maybe that's an answer to some of Jose's questions. I'll answer a couple other questions, but I do, and please cut me off when I should stop talking because I don't want to babble endlessly and let everyone get on with their day and continue with the rest of the program. I did want to know one thing that was really interesting, which is that I wanted to flag one of the student awardees. So Fiona, I thought, did something very interesting. She actually did this thing of working with institutions, designing institutions, rather than just relying on sort of moral suasion or hoping that people will be good. You know, this is a situation where there was cheating going on. And she said, how can we structure peer feedback such that that institution will help reduce cheating? And designing something like that requires thinking like, okay, the people who are cheating, it's not because they're all bad people. It's because probably there are some people who are doing it. It's because of the circumstances you set up better institutions and they'll do better things. And I was really struck when I was hearing the description of what Fiona had done, and I thought that was fantastic. Okay, other questions. So Jim writes in chat, is society more accepting of unethical behavior from business and community leadership than in the past? You know, I think, Jim, honestly, I would say there are changes in the things that society focuses on. So there are some things that would have been in the past considered that's unacceptable, clearly out of bounds, you know, leader, you know, for a business or community leader, that now it's kind of like, oh, I guess that just happened. But there's other types of behavior that in the past would have been considered, oh, that's, you know, that just happens, that's fine, maybe even good, where people are like, no, that's problematic. So I think there are changes in societal norms surrounding this. I wouldn't necessarily say that we're overall more or less accepting. That's a harder thing for me to assess. Okay, and I should wrap up soon. So the one last question I'll answer is the one that William asks in chat, which is, why did I choose to study and teach ethics? And honestly, it's kind of by accident. So I'm why does a political economy scholar and a game theorist wind up writing a book about, you know, leading with values in business and life? Well, it's by accident. The school needed someone to staff the ethics class. It's actually a very challenging class to teach. because it's contentious conversations. And a lot of students are kind of skeptical coming in. They think it's going to be like indoctrination time or a fig leaf or something like that, or a scared straight program. And so it's a challenging class to teach. And I really struggled with it for a while. But over time, what I've seen is that these questions of what are people's core values and how do we live by them as individuals? How do we lead with our core values as leaders of institutions, and how should we be thinking about them as a society? Those are just some of the most important questions. And once you start thinking about them, it's kind of hard to stop thinking about them. So with that, I'll say thank you all for listening. And now we'll get back to the fun part of the program.
Thank you, Professor Schatz. I'm glad to see that your RILA camp paid off and you're doing great things. Everyone, even at home, let's give Professor Schatz a round of applause. Can we do that? Thank you so much for being with us today, Professor Schatz. Next up, we'd like to do the Large Business Award. Here comes Robert.
Thank you, William. I'm delighted to announce the recipient of the Large Business Category Award of the inaugural North Coast Rotary Business Ethics Award goes to Oliver's Market. Congratulations. And with that, our award ceremony is concluded, but I'd like to recognize our past district governor, Doug Johnson, to provide some closing remarks. Doug?
Thank you, Robert. Well, I hope you have enjoyed today as much as I have. What started a couple years ago is just a vision of what could be, and to see it come together today, to see those 3 students, amazing future leaders. There is hope. The businesses, the 12 finalists, and even the 70 plus that were nominated, there's a lot that is going on in our communities that is good. And we need to seek that out. And I hope you maybe have found some new places to do business in your local communities. And then I was thinking, as Ken Schatz was speaking, the part about how community can affect ethics. Left to our own, we drift off and we think we're good. But it's when we're in community, and that is defined in a lot of ways, that we work with each other. And Rotary is a community. That's one of the reasons why I'm in Rotary. We have ethical standards. We do our best. We're not perfect. We do our best to meet these standards and the things we think, say, and do. One of the aspects of community was the committee I got to work with. Come on up here. I want to see all the faces. Cindy and Tom are not with us today, but you have met Robert doing the speaking on the businesses. He led up all the interviews of all the businesses in the selection process. Bunch in a little bit. William, who is the chair, who drove the bus the whole time, and he kept us in line, on track. Excellent job. Jim, who handled the student scholarships and worked with the students. Thank you very much. And Sylvia, integral part on the committee, giving input at various points, working on the selections of the businesses as well. So, and Cindy Denbo, not here, who did PR, and Tom Boylan, who did the website. So thank you. Thank you all. I also want to give a special shout out to Michael Nisler. Michael is a Rotarian down in Petaluma. He is the one that did all the videos. You saw those 12 videos. He gathered it all together, produced them, and put them together into really nice videos. So thank you, Michael, Rotarian and friend. Want to acknowledge Sound Ideas, who did the production for this. So thank you for stepping in at the last moment when we went from live to virtual. And again, without our sponsors, Summit State Bank, Spalding McCullough Tansel, Jennifer Strong of Strong Financial Network, and Boylan Point Agency, we would not have had the resources to put this together. So thank you all. I hope you now go and open your internet browser, Google Rotary near me, find the club, get engaged. It's a great organization. We would love to have you. Thank you and have a wonderful day.